Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to all of you joining from India and different parts of the world. Thank you for joining today when we are having a holiday, our Independence Day. Today's session is very interesting and deals with FDA 483 observations and warning letters. It is titled Best Practices for Responding to FDA 483 Observations and Warning Letters. I am Uday Shetty, Chairman ISPE India. I volunteer in organizing and moderating these educational sessions. So let me start this session by saying first a few words about ISPE India and then a few words about today's subject matter expert, Daniel Roberts. We are very fortunate to have a person who has worked with FDA in India for a couple of years come here and give us a talk. ISP India is a not-for-profit organization, as all of you know, and is registered as a charitable trust in India. We serve pharmaceutical professionals by creating a platform to share knowledge, impart training through educational sessions like this one, and by creating opportunities for networking. ISP India understands your professional needs and is here to help you with our complimentary pharma best practices webinar series. These webinars are complimentary and are available to all pharmaceutical professionals all over the world. We have hosted 35 sessions till now in the last 5 months or so, and today's session is the 36th one. Each session, as all of you know, features a leading subject matter expert. The topics cover critical and relevant issues in pharmaceutical manufacturing, quality, and technology. Information about these webinars is available on our website, ispindia.net. You can register for the webinars which are planned in the next 2 or 3 months on this website. Recordings of the past webinars is also available on this site. Please visit this website, ispindia.net, because there are several interesting webinars planned right till the month of December. Now, let me now introduce today's subject matter expert, Daniel Roberts. Daniel J. Roberts, Senior Specialist Pharmaceutical and Biotechnology Practice, has over 19 years of government, regulatory, and pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical industry experience. He was with United States FDA as an investigator for 8 years, including 2 years overseas as the primary point of contact for conducting pharmaceutical inspections at the FDA India office located at the United States Embassy in New Delhi, India. As an investigator, Mr. Roberts conducted pre-approval inspections and for-cause investigations and inspections of pharmaceutical manufacturers of human and veterinary sterile and non-sterile finished dosage forms and APIs worldwide. During his tenure at the agency, he conducted over 100 pharmaceutical inspections as a lead investigator. Indeed, we are fortunate to have Daniel Roberts with us. And ladies and gentlemen, with these few words, let me welcome Daniel Roberts to give today's presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Uday. Appreciate being here and happy Independence Day to everyone. It's a pleasure being here, and so hopefully, you learn something from today's presentation. So today I'll be talking about best practices for responding to FDA observations and warning letters. When I was at the India office, I reviewed a lot of responses from companies and things like that. So I'll kind of talk about some of the best practices and some of the pitfalls that I've noticed when reviewing some of these responses to FDA. So the talk that I'll be giving today will be mostly regarding US FDA responses, but the same concepts can also be applied to observations that you would receive from vendors, from vendor audits, or any other type of regulatory inspection from other agencies. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the different types of FDA inspections. Some of the items that FDA is kind of focusing on during recent inspections, at pharma companies, and then how regulatory inspection management, and then some of the consequences regarding noncompliance. Um, uh, you know, uh, some of the consequences of being noncompliant. Okay. So today's presentation will be, I have about 45 slides. So you know, I'll go for about an hour, and then after that we'll have kind of like a Q&A session where you can ask some questions, and hopefully I'll be able to respond to those. If not, I can always follow up with you after the webinar as well. Okay, so the first topic we'll be talking about is types of FDA inspections. So there's pre-approval inspections. So that would be, in India, there's a lot of ANDA applications. So pre-approval inspection would be an inspection when you submit an application to review some of the data that was submitted to the agency. And basically, these pre-approval inspections are kind of three-phase. So you're looking at, there's a data integrity element to make sure that whatever data was submitted to the FDA is true and accurate. Conformance to the application. So, whatever information you put in the application, are you conforming to that application when you're manufacturing the product, and then also ability to manufacture, so readiness for manufacture. So those kind of three components are covered during pre-approval inspections. Okay, the next one is post-approval inspections. So that would be when there's a pre-approval inspection and they're looking at an application, and then there may be an assignment, maybe like 1 or 2 years later, where FDA would want to come back and see, now that the product's been approved, how is the product performing as far as, you'd be looking at more of the product from a process validation perspective. That would be kind of post-approval inspections. Post-approval inspections are basically looking at process validation and how the ability of the company to manufacture the product consistently, and that's basically a post-approval. And then there's surveillance inspections, which are most of the inspections that FDA conducts are surveillance inspections. So that would be more of like routine inspections. The next one is for cause inspection. So if there's any type of complaint, or maybe there's like a field alert report, or some other reason a for cause assignment may be assigned. So that would be for cause inspections. And generally for cause inspections are unannounced. So, sometimes, in India, there might be unannounced inspections. Generally, those are for cause inspections, but not always. But but for the most part, unannounced inspections, especially for foreign facilities, are usually for cause. And then there's also BIMO inspections, so bio research monitoring. So that would be like your sites conducting bioequivalent studies and things like that. Okay. So when FDA does inspections, they cover 6 systems. So quality systems, so that would be like your deviations, your change controls, complaints, things like that. So all those things kind of fall under what they call a quality system. And then laboratory, that would include, out of specification results, laboratory operations. The next one is materials. So that would be like your warehousing operations. And then also like water systems also is covered in materials. Facilities and equipment, you're looking at calibration, things like that. Production, looking at like process validation, batch records, and then packaging and labeling. So there's these 6 systems that are set up, but like how they're designed is when FDA does inspections, they're using these things called the 211 regulations. So that's the FDA regulations to cover the manufacture of finished dosage pharmaceuticals. So these 6 systems will cover basically all the regulations under 211. So So it's kind of cool. So it's the way it's designed is it should cover all aspects of your pharmaceutical manufacturing using these 6 systems that are listed here. And generally, for sites that have never been inspected by FDA, all 6 systems will be covered during these inspections. And then when there's like official action indicated follow-up, so if there's a follow-up to a warning letter or any type of other issue, all of these 6 systems will generally be covered. But for routine inspections that are more like surveillance based, when I was talking about earlier, you can cover 2 of those systems. So, quality is always covered during all inspections. So that would be like deviations, complaints, all of the things that are covered under your quality system are covered during every inspection. But uh, the inspection program for FDA is covered where quality has to always be covered, but then one other system can be covered for an abbreviated inspection. So abbreviated inspections are conducted for companies that have a good compliance history and there's no real issues on a routine basis. So okay, so let me go to the next one. So I was talking about briefly the 6 systems. So those are also covered during there's documents that are issued by FDA called compliance programs. So I listed some of the compliance programs here, and what those do is they go over, the different criteria that should be covered during FDA inspection. So if you look up compliance program 7356.002, it'll tell you exactly like if you're to conduct a drug inspection, what elements should be included in that inspection. So it covers all those 6 systems and what's nice about it is it bullets out in each of those systems what to cover. So for the quality system, you must cover complaints and you must cover it gives a list of various aspects to cover for each of the systems. So for each program area, they have a different compliance program. So for the finished dosage, there's 7356002, and then there's one for pre-approval inspections. There's one for biotech drugs. There's one for active pharmaceutical ingredients. So it's a good idea to be at least a little bit familiar with these compliance programs, because then it gives you a perspective of like what FDA is going to be evaluating when they come to your site for an inspection. So and also what's nice about these documents is at the end of the document, it also gives some consideration for, if you find this during an inspection, it may be classified as official action indicated. So it gives a list of maybe like 10 different items, 10 to 20 different items that may be considered objectionable, by the agency if you were written up for something. So it's kind of, so they'll talk about data integrity elements in there that would be significant, which may lead to an OAI classification. So it's good to be at least familiar with these compliance programs. So the next one is I wanted to go over a little bit of, what is FDA kind of finding when they're doing these inspections? So every year, FDA publishes a list of the most frequently issued observations for pharmaceutical. Actually, for every program area that they do inspections for, they classify, for this given year, how many observations for inadequate quality system are there? How many observations have been issued for bad investigations? So every year they come up with a list that's, I think it's usually published in like November or December, where they talk about the most common 43 observations that are issued. So it's always kind of interesting to kind of look at some of the issues that FDA finds most frequently during inspections. So what's interesting about the list that they publish every year is it's always kind of the same top, I'd say top 5 observations consistently over the past 10 years, if you look back in time, you'll find the same issues um, being brought up by FDA during inspection. So what I wanted to kind of go over, I did some analysis for 2019. So the most frequent issued 483 for 2019 is responsibilities of the quality unit are not fully followed. So it's kind of, and it gives the citation, so that's 211.22. So that citation could fall under a lot of different things. So, failure to review, uh, complaint or whatnot. So these are the um, observations that are most frequently issued. But I wanted to highlight on here is 211.192 is investigations. So I'd say, consistently over, uh, the decades of FDA, FDA continues to find issues regarding investigations of discrepancies and failures. So that would be, your OOS investigations, your deviation investigations. It could also be your complaint investigations. So just investigations in general are always kind of a focus for FDA during inspections, and a lot of companies struggle with conducting investigations and things like that. So consistently, throughout the years, investigations is very popular as far as 43 items. So just on this other list here, scientific laboratory controls. So basically, establishing um, scientifically sound laboratory controls, absence of written procedures, cleaning and maintenance, and testing for distribution. So those were the top the top 6 observations for 2019. So I'll go to the next one. So for 2018, you can see it's, as I was talking about earlier, the first one is still regarding, responsibility of the quality unit. The other one's regarding laboratory. And then again, investigations is up there, absence of written procedures, cleaning and maintenance. And 211.68 is more of like, a lot of your electronic data integrity issues would fall under that. So that would be like your Part 11 issues would also fall under 211.68. So going to 2017, again, the same thing. There's the first one is regarding quality. The next one's regarding laboratory. The next one's regarding investigations, written procedures. The next one is cleaning and lab related things. Again, 2016, quality, laboratory, investigations, absence of written procedures. This one's a little bit different. This one's regarding environmental monitoring, and generally that's regarding sterile manufacturing, issues with environmental monitoring with that. And then the next one's calibration. Again, quality system, laboratory controls, investigations. Next one's regarding sterile products, microbial contamination. So that could fall under a lot of different categories, but generally 113B is regarding, sterile manufacturing, procedures, environmental monitoring. So I just kind of wanted to go, what's interesting about this is it's consistently over the years, they're the same observations that kind of come up. So it gives companies a good idea about what FDA is really concerned with regarding, issuance of 483s. So responsibility of the quality system, that's really important. The quality system is, responsible for oversight of all, manufacturing activity. So there's a lot of responsibilities for a quality system. So oftentimes that's, on 43 observations. So, but I also want to make, investigations keep coming up and laboratory controls. So it just kind of gives a perspective over like what FDA is really concerned with regarding it, when they're doing investigate or inspections. So what is, so I just wanted to talk briefly about, what is FDA's compliance focus for, and more recently, what is FDA kind of looking at during inspections, right? So again, I was talking about, OOS investigations, that's always a common a pitfall for companies, and where I see a lot of issues regarding OOS investigations is kind of defining the scope of the investigation, and it should be scientifically justified. So a lot of times when you're looking at investigations, like companies will say, oh, it's just limited to this batch, but like when you're documenting that in the investigation, it's important to define the scope. Like, why is it only limited to this batch? Like, why doesn't it include other batches? So when you guys are doing investigations, it's really important to define and scientifically justify the scope of the investigation. Like, is it just limited to this isolated event, or is it more widespread? So both when you're doing the investigation and when you're responding in to observations, it's really, really important to define, why am I only looking at this, or why am I not broadening the scope of this issue? So and not only defining that, but also like, what's your rationale uh, for that, for defining that scope? What's your rationale for that scope? So that's really important. And a lot of companies struggle with that, like just limiting the scope just to this one issue that we found. But it's really important to define that. The other things the FDA is finding is invalidated OOSs. Maybe improperly invalidated. So what I mean by that is, let's say you get an OOS investigation, and or let's say if I'm looking at 2 years of data, and I find that 90% of your OOS investigations, the attributable root cause is due to laboratory error. It could mean multiple things, but FDA recently has been taking the perspective that companies are invalidating OOS results and then retesting based on laboratory error. So it's almost like a different way of kind of testing into compliance. So it's good for companies to kind of monitor how many laboratory errors that they're receiving in the QC laboratory, and try to implement some corrective actions to kind of minimize the number of laboratory errors. I mean things in the laboratory, things happen, but like you can't attribute all OOS results to laboratory error and then immediately go to retesting. So just be conscious of that, and kind of monitor that. And if there's any type of CAPAs that you can implement to reduce the number of laboratory errors, it would be very beneficial. So FDA is kind of sensitive to that issue. So it's a good idea to kind of monitor those. And then when you're doing your OOS investigations, make sure you're following there's an OOS guidance on conducting OOS investigations, and determining root cause and hypothesis testing. That's FDA released this guidance document, and I think it was October of 2006. But that's kind of the document that FDA does or references when they're evaluating these OOS investigations. So it's really important to be, familiar with that guidance document. And then that guidance document's also in line with other guidance documents that I think there's one that's issued by MHRA. So they're very much in line with the same type of concept and principles for conducting OOS investigations. So the other recent one, I'd say within the last few years, is regarding impurities. There's a greater concern regarding impurities for both APIs and finished dosages, and impurities that may be and the one I'm specifically talking about is nitrosamine impurities. So there was batches of valsartan that had this impurity, nitrosamine NDMA. So there's an ongoing assessment at FDA to find other products that may have nitrosamine impurities. So some examples are metformin and ranitidine. So just when you guys are conducting your manufacturing operations, just consider the possible sources of impurities, and that it's important to conduct some type of risk assessment to determine the probability of getting these nitrosamine impurities. Because there's been a lot of press releases regarding nitrosamine impurities. So FDA is very sensitive with nitrosamine impurities. So it's really important to have like a risk assessment in place to define what are the possible sources of any type of nitrosamine impurities. So as I was talking about earlier, they're very sensitive to this issue. There's a lot of press releases regarding it. So looking at potential sources of nitrosamine impurities, dedicated versus non-dedicated equipment, recovered solvent versus fresh solvent, cleaning validation, your test method validation for detection of impurities, and then also extending the scope of the investigation to include all affected batches. So, as I was talking about earlier, is a lot of companies, when they're doing these investigations, limit the scope of the investigation. It's really, really important to, define the scope of why it's limited to this particular product, or, why is it not the scope more broadened? So when you're conducting any type of investigation, it's really important to define the scope of that, right? And I was talking about earlier is having that risk assessment available for non-sartan products, because FDA is concerned with nitrosamine impurities in other products. So it's really important to have that risk assessment available in case FDA comes to your site and says, I'm really concerned with, have you conducted any type of assessment for determination of nitrosamine impurities in your product? That's why it's really important to have this risk assessment that's looking at different possible sources for nitrosamine impurities, and then also having adequate supplier oversight. So I'm talking about finished dosage, having supplier oversight of your API manufacturing to make sure that your API manufacturers not using recovered solvents or something that may introduce nitrosamine. So I just want, these are kind of things that FDA will be looking at, when they're conducting inspections regarding impurities. So it's important to have those on hand. I was talking about, having that comprehensive risk assessment available from key starting materials through finished dosage, and then if you do have nitrosamine, establishing those specifications, and just they'll look at nitrosamine as far as through your quality system to see if it's adequately able to detect whether nitrosamines are in your product. So data integrity is always a big focus for FDA. So I just want to kind of go through some items that they're looking at during inspections regarding data integrity. So again, data integrity, I'm sure we're all familiar with that, the Alcoa principles. It should be attributable, legible, contemporaneously recorded, original, and accurate. So just not only looking at it from like a electronic data perspective, but also from a physical records perspective, the issuance of documents from QA, in addition to Part 11 compliance, both of those things are generally looked at during inspection, both from a paper-based system and electronic-based. So it's important to have. I know sometimes I go to companies and they only have, really strong document control, so paper-based things, and then when it comes to Part 11 compliance, there might be significant gaps in that, or some companies have great Part 11, management of electronic data, but then when it comes to paper documents, it might be some deficiencies noted in there. So it's important to have data integrity, both looking at it from both an electronic perspective and also paper records. And I just wanted to note on here, FDA investigators, spend a lot of, significant time looking for data integrity issues. I was talking about it earlier regarding, pre-approval inspections. That's one of the key focuses for pre-approval inspections is remember I was talking about data integrity, conformance to the application, and then also, readiness for commercial manufacturing. So that's like a third of what they're going to be looking at during pre-approval inspection. So that's why FDA is so concerned with like data integrity. You're submitting this data to FDA. Is it really accurate data? So that's what FDA is going to be doing when they're doing these pre-approval inspections. So that's why there's a significant amount of focus on data integrity. I just also want to say, some FDA investigators may not leave the QC laboratory just reviewing electronic data, HPLC data or any type of electronic data to find some discrepancies, for data integrity. So there's a real big focus on data integrity, and again that goes back to both control of electronic data and paper records. And then, there's dozens of FDA warning letters that are focused on data integrity. There's lots of import alerts and a lot of withholding approval. So I was talking about pre-approval inspections where data integrity is, evaluated as part of pre-approval inspection. So if you find significant data integrity issues during a pre-approval inspection, the application may be withheld. And then what FDA is looking at regarding data integrity is, controls and oversight by the quality system. As I was talking about earlier, when looking at those observations that FDA makes on an annual basis, one of the common ones is the quality system. Is authority of the quality unit. So that's the quality unit should have proper authority over data integrity. So the FDA is going to be looking at that, having a data integrity policy or, procedures in place can go a long way. So the FDA is going to be looking for data manipulation, during pre-approval inspections and, surveillance inspections. And how does FDA how do companies kind of handle data integrity issues? Again, going back to the scope of investigations, are they only going to be focused on that actual issue that they found the data integrity with, or is it more widespread? So defining that scope is really, really important, and having proper risk assessments associated with data integrity investigations. A lot of times what I'll see is if there's like a DI or data integrity issue at a company, a lot of times companies want to limit the scope of it, so just to that one issue. But it's unclear if the scope should really be broadened. So there's, I find that it's a pretty frequent issue, where a DI issue comes up and it's just isolated to that one incident, but not the scope is not expanded to other areas or other products or other issues. So it's important to like define that scope again. And then what type of CAPAs were implemented to address any lapses in data integrity, right, and prevent them from reoccurring. So these are kind of things that FDA is looking at. So the other thing is, there's an increased scrutiny of application data that's submitted to the agency, clinical data, and again, going back to OOS investigations, are always a big focus for FDA inspections. So making sure that your investigations are proper, are thorough and thoroughly documented, right? Okay, so these are just some warning letters regarding, the first one is regarding OOS investigations. As I was talking about earlier, Um, you know, OOS investigations are important because the FDA was always looking at those. You know, and I was talking about earlier is regarding invalidating OOSs due to laboratory error. You know, it's important to test any type of hypothesis that you have regarding uh, the causes for OOSs. A lot of companies also struggle with you know doing proper hypothesis testing on some of the um, potential root causes for OOS investigation. So if you have an idea about why an OOS result was generated, it's important to kind of generate a hypothesis testing um, to kind of test to see if that hypothesis is true, right? So um, so conducting hypothesis investigations is important for that, especially when you're trying to demonstrate that it's laboratory error. That's where hypothesis testing comes into play, where you can definitively say, yes, a laboratory error occurred, and we have data to support whatever type of conclusions we made that a laboratory error actually occurred. That's FDA is a science-based agency, so it's whenever possible, it's important to have scientific rationale through risk assessments or scientific data generated to show your thought on something. So if you have a hypothesis on why something occurred, it's always good to test that hypothesis and have data to support that. Yes, this is our thought on it, and we ran this test and we generated data that supports our hypothesis. That goes a long way in investigations, right? So this second warning letter that I reference here is, you know, um, having adequate control over paper records. So that this is an example of a batch record, uh, a blank batch record that was in um, the production area. So it's important for QA to issue documents properly to the production group, and then reconcile those documents that are being issued by QA. Just don't leave like controlled documents laying around your manufacturing area. That's a um, that could be an objectionable situation that may show up on a 43, right? So when it comes to inspections, what types of things should you be doing during inspections with FDA, right? So I'll just kind of go over some, helpful pointers on regulatory inspection management. First thing is don't um, delay, deny, limit or refuse a drug inspection. So that's a really easy way to put a company on an import alert is to refuse an inspection. So if you get a call or a notice from FDA saying an inspection is going to be coming, or you know, try your best to accommodate that inspection. You may get, sometimes like when you're scheduling inspections, some companies will say, that week really doesn't work well with our schedule. Can you come back like 2 weeks from then? Um, Most likely FDA is going to come back and say, no, we're coming on that date. I mean, it's when they're scheduling inspections, it's not really like making an appointment. It's more of like telling you that they're going to be there at that site. So it's always a good idea to accommodate, any FDA inspections, right? Because if you deny, you say, no, I don't want you at my site, that can be thought of as a refusal, and then you'll get another email back that says, uh, are you really like refusing this inspection? And then if you say yes, oftentimes the company will be put on import alert for refusing an inspection. Um, so, try to accommodate inspections. The next one is uh, provide documents in a timely manner. Sometimes when you're doing inspections, when you request a document, if there's like an excessive amount of time that it takes the company to generate that document or provide that document, um, you know, that might be an issue, because it may be like delaying the inspection. So just make sure that that you provide documents in a timely manner. So a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll actually measure, like, when the document's requested, the time it takes from the point of when it's requested to when it's provided. And so, like, you can create like kind of a metrics to, like, when the document's requested to when it's provided, and then kind of like see if you can get faster at providing these documents and things like that. So that's also a really good way of managing it, because if the FDA comes back and says, hey, look, you're taking too long to provide these documents, you have data, again, going back to this, to having data generated for FDA, because it's a science-based agency. You could say, hey, it's really only taking me 25 minutes or 22 minutes to provide each document, and we've consistently been tracking every document request that you've made. So, it's good both from um, an improvement perspective in providing documents quickly, but also, like, providing some data and how fast you're providing documents during inspection. It's also a good idea to provide training to employees on FDA inspections. I find it often, when I'm doing inspection, I'm in the laboratory. There's, when I'm interviewing employees, like, they're not used to interacting with the FDA. So a lot of times they're kind of shy, or they won't really answer questions, so you kind of want to train your employees to feel comfortable talking to FDA during inspection. So, having group trainings, some role playing, things like that can go a long way in helping people, feel comfortable in answering questions about their activities that they're performing. Because FDA, when they're doing inspections, really want to talk to the people that are performing the activity, and not really, the upper management. So, they'll say, let me go to the lab and let me talk to this person that's actually doing this activity, instead of have the quality manager explain, like, what this person's doing. They want to see that the actual person that's performing the activity is knowledgeable and able to do that, right? It's also a good idea to be proactive in clarifying any confusion during the inspection. I see oftentimes, after an inspection, a company will complain and say, we didn't, the investigator was confused during the inspection, and then, we didn't have an opportunity to, say our side of the story. So it's important to, if there's any type of confusion during the inspection, or in any type of misleading information that may have been provided or something like that, it's really, really important to clarify that at the time of occurrence. So I've seen it so many times where the companies will say, oh, well, an employee, like, misspoke about something. So if somebody misspeaks, like, immediately say, hey, are you sure that's what you mean by this? Clarify these issues at the time of occurrence during inspection. Because FDA is there to do inspections, and they want to know, that they're only there for, like, a limited amount of time. So, and it's a fact gathering activity. So, any type of misleading information is not really helpful during the inspection. So that's why it's really important to clarify any confusion that may be there. Information provided during the inspection should be fact-based. So going back to risk assessments, like, a lot of companies will say, well, we tried to tell the investigator that the the reason why we're doing this is because of XYZ or whatever. But it's important to have those risk assessments available on your, and scientific rationale for whatever decisions that you're making. So that's what I mean by information should be science-based and fact-based. So risk assessments are really important. And maintain open communication and ask for daily wrap-ups during inspection. So that's important. Most of the time FDA will conduct daily wrap-ups during inspections. Sometimes they won't, but it's always a good idea to kind of, ask for a daily wrap-up, either at the end of the day or at the beginning of the next day. Just in case there's any type of issues that come up during the wrap-up meeting, you can clarify them, right? Don't wait until the 483 is issued to try and clarify issues. That's the point of the daily wrap-ups. when you are issued the 483, just make sure you review it for any factual inaccuracies. Um, and then if there's any type of factual inaccuracies, try to have the investigator correct those at the time of the inspection. It's unlikely that FDA is going to come back and correct any type of things on the 483 that are not factual inaccuracies. So for example, like if you review the 483 and you're like, I really don't like the way this is worded, most likely the investigator is not going to change that. But like, if you review the 483 and you find that there's some type of factual inaccuracy on the 483, that the investigator should, correct that prior to leaving, because you want to make sure the 483 is factually accurate, right? Make sure you take a lot of notes during the inspection. And then understand the issues raised during the inspection and clarify any misunderstandings. So a lot of times, companies will be issued a 483 and they're like, I really don't understand what this investigator's talking about, so that's not a good way to handle it. So you really want to understand the issues and then, take notes on the inspection, what's discussed, what's requested, and clarify any misunderstandings. And the other thing is just be professional, be courteous and professional. It can go a long way. Sometimes if you're kind of combative during inspection, that it's not really helpful. So just be professional and courteous. Um, hold on. Hold on. Okay, so the next thing is, what are some of the consequences of, understanding the consequences of non-compliance, right? So this next section, I'll kind of go over some of these things. So what are some of the consequences of being non-compliant during an inspection? So, you'll get a FDA 483. As a result of the 483, you may get regulatory meetings with the FDA. You may get an untitled letter, a warning letter. It could lead to recalls, voluntary shutdown, import alert, withholds for applications, and then a press release and Twitter. So it's important to be, compliant, during, the ones that I highlighted on this slide are ones that are most common, especially for like foreign manufacturers. So like, 483s, regulatory meetings, warning letters. Those are generally what some of the immediate consequences from non-compliance, and then also import alert, right? So, going back to the 483, so, they're inspectional observations. So, based on the investigator's judgment, if the drug has been adulterated or held under unsanitary conditions, those are things that will be issued on FDA 483. Basically, like anything that's against like the ICH-Q7 for API manufacturing or 211 regulations for finished dosage manufacturing will be, documented on the FDA 483 at the conclusion of the inspection. So again, observations should be clear, specific, and significant, and factual, right? Those are, it's important. So make sure when you get a 483, you review it and make sure it's factual. Usually 483s are usually non-public. There are some 483s that are, published on the FDA website, but those are usually for, high profile inspections. Sometimes they will release the 483 on the website. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, 483s. You can request 483s through FDA through a process called the Freedom of Information Act. They call it FOIA request. So you can get 483s from other companies through the Freedom of Information Act, but those those 43s are redacted. So any type of like product names or you know specific information regarding batches or products and stuff like that will be a red line. So those will be, usually they're like it says B and then it says 4 on there. So that's like a red line copy um, of the 483s that are requested through Freedom of Information Act. So sometimes you'll see them on websites will publish FDA 43s, but those are all always redacted copies. And then the ones that are issued on the FDA website are also redacted. So any ones that are public 483s are always going to be redacted 483s. It's important to review the 483 closely, clarify any misunderstandings, and during the closeout, make sure that you commit to responding in writing during the closeout meeting. So FDA will, after they issue the 43, they'll go over and say all the observations, and then they'll say, you have 15 business days to respond to this? Do you plan on responding to these observations? And then I think, it's optional to respond to the 483, but most companies, I think I've only had maybe one or two that did not respond to 483s when I was working at FDA. So it's always a good idea to respond to the 483s, and by not responding to the 483, I mean it's pretty much it's not really not recommended. So just respond to any type of observations you get. And then when you're responding to the FDA, it's important to assemble a core team. So having people from different departments, different areas to kind of discuss some of the CAPAs, or I think this is regarding more of like the core team available during the closeout. So make sure you have somebody available from manufacturing, laboratory, quality, various parts, department heads of the different areas. So if there's any misunderstandings, they can be clarified during the closeout meeting. And then after you get the 483, going back to that core team is, assembling a team of people from different departments to kind of come up with solutions to address the 483 are really important. The other thing is a lot of companies struggle with when they get 483s is what's the impact of the 483? Like what's going to happen next? Like, I got this 483, does it mean that I'm going to be on import alert? Or I got this 483, is nothing going to happen to me? I got this 483, should I really be concerned with this 483, right? So it's always a good idea to kind of get an outside, non-biased opinion of the impact of the 483. So, talking to someone outside the immediate scope of that company to kind of say, we received this 483, what do you kind of think about it? And not just get like one person's opinion, but get, other people's opinion. You may ask somebody and they say, don't worry about it, but I say, fine, okay, good. So one person said, don't worry about it, but then go to somebody else and say, we got this 483, what do you think about it? And get multiple kind of outside opinions on, the impact of 483. That's always kind of a good way of looking at it. Because I think a lot of times when companies get 483s, they're like, either they're too overly concerned with a thing that might not be an issue, or they're not concerned enough with the issues being raised. So it's really important to get like an outside opinion on, what's the impact of this 483, right? It's like, going to the doctor, and if you get like a surgery, it's probably a good idea to get multiple, multiple people to look at it and evaluate it, right? It's the same kind of concept with this, right? Get multiple opinions. Yeah. So again, going back, you have 15 business days to submit your initial response. The initial response to address each observation and provide timelines to address the observation. So a lot of times, like when you respond in 15 business days, it's really not enough time to put in like comprehensive corrective actions to the observation. So it's important like to discuss in your initial response, these are the things that we done immediately. There's some things like you can do like procedural revisions pretty quickly, but like, some type of long-term remediation or some type of long-term change, it's important to discuss that in the response and the timelines for completion of those different activities, right? And so review each observation carefully and, make sure that the written response is directly addressing the observation. And again, going back, it's a good idea to seek advice from internal experts and third parties. It's good to like get an idea outside your own kind of, I always say, outside of your own little bubble to see, is this does our response adequately address the observation? It's really important. So what does the 483 response kind of look like? So there's generally a cover letter that includes a summary of the inspection, the dates of the inspection, the point of contact for correspondences. That's generally it's generally like 1-page cover letter that provides all that information. And then you have your narrative response. So the narrative response should be well organized, fact-based, include timelines for completion activities, reference any type of attachments that are associated with corrections that are made to the 483. I think where a lot of people make the mistake is when they're writing their narrative response, is they say, yeah, we corrected this issue, refer to attachment 3, but not really discussing what attachment 3 includes, so like it's good to include like perspective in the narrative response and lead the reader to a certain conclusion, right? So like in that example, I said, in the narrative response, see attachment 3, and list the document and then say, this document was revised to address blah, 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 and, see page whatever on attachment 3 for evidence of this correction. It's always good to reference specifically in the attachment where you're talking about, and then also discuss in the narrative, like why was this change made and the significance of the change, not just say, see this attachment and then come to your own conclusion, So the attachment should include procedures and other, corrections that were made following the inspection. Sometimes companies would make responses in the narrative and say, we made revisions to SOP, 321, but like there's no attachment with SOP 321 on there to show evidence of the correction. So it's both a good idea to discuss what the correction is in a narrative response, and then also include evidence of the correction in the attachment. Right, and a lot of 483s have a theme. So developing a kappa that addresses this theme is critical. So a lot of 483s may have a theme of data integrity. So what type of kappa are you going to be implemented to address this theme of data integrity, both electronically and paper-based? So coming up with some overall corrective action plan may be beneficial to address this, right? And the corrective action plan may be, looking at both paper records and electronic records for data integrity, right? So, a kappa plan should be, both, holistic and comprehensive. So not just limiting the corrective action to the one issue that's found during the inspection. So FDA, like, they always have the ideas like, they probably go to facilities maybe once every 3 years or sometimes even once every 5 years, sometimes more frequently. But, when they're on site for maybe 5 to 7 days, there's a lot to look at. So if they find an issue and document that on the 483, it's important to state in your response whether that's really just an isolated incident or is it more widespread and more, in a more broader scope needs to be taken to address the observation. So that's really important to discuss in your response. The going back to the scope of investigations, defining that and saying why it's isolated or why I need to expand the scope of it. CAPA should be specific, and effectiveness checks should be data-driven. So, if you implement a CAPA, doing some type of CAPA effectiveness check and describing what type of CAPA effectiveness check you're going to be doing, and what type of data are you going to be reviewing as far as that like effectiveness check. All that should be documented in the response. And again, including examples of corrections as attachments in the response. And including product impacts for U.S. distributed products. So if there was an observation related to a specific product, what is the overall product impact? So that's really important to discuss in your response to FDA. Like, we received this observation, but really, is there any product impact? So stating that up front in the narrative response is really important. And also including monthly updates. So like, let's say if you have corrective actions that are going to be implemented over, let's say next month, providing FDA an update like, okay, we said this was going to be done next month, and responding a month later saying, yes, this correction was implemented on blank date, and the CAPA was effectiveness check will be checked in 2 months, right? So providing FDA not only an initial 43 response, but also providing monthly updates on the progress of those corrections is really important. Sometimes companies will just respond once to FDA, and that might be fine if there's like a procedural change or some type of simple corrective action to a 43 observation. But a lot of times, corrections may take time to implement. So updating FDA on a continuous basis, on a monthly basis, until those corrections have been implemented and successfully checked for CAPA effectiveness should be part of your response, right? So when you respond to FDA, I listed on here the email address to respond to FDA. It should be within 15 business days. So a lot of companies used to send hard copy responses, but FDA is encouraging people to send it electronically. So I included the email address here, and it should be under 100 megabytes. And if it's more than that, then you can send it in separate emails. But and then when you send the email, include the FEI number of the facility, the name of the company, and in the email, include the company location, the date of the inspection, the name of the people that conducted the inspection. So when you send that response, both ORA, which is ORA is the group of FDA that conducts the inspections, and CEDAR is basically the group that approves the applications. So Office of Manufacturing Quality may be reviewing your response, and then also like the Office of Process and Facilities is responsible for reviewing the responses for pre-approval inspections. OPF is responsible for like GMP quality for pre-approval inspections, and OMQ is more of like responsible for surveillance inspections and products that have already been approved, right? So what happens after the inspection? So if a potential official action indicated is so if, let's say the observations you receive are significant, the FDA investigator has 2 days after the inspection to notify the Center for Drugs whether the inspection is potentially official action indicated. So official action indicated would be, warning letter, untitled letter, import alert, application withhold. Those are all kinds of consequences of inspections being classified as official action indicated. And generally those are inspections where the 43 observations are very significant. So 2 days, the recommendation has to be put in by the FDA investigator. And then the Office of Regulatory Affairs is the ones that conduct that's the division within FDA that conducts the inspection. So they have, hold Just a second here. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Yeah, yeah, sure, no problem.
Let me see. Hold on. I'm trying to see. Hold on. Just a second here. Bear with me. I'm sorry. Okay. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. Okay. So, ORA has their time period for, for classifying this. So if it's OAI, then the final classification and decision letter has to be made within 90 days after the inspection closeout. So that's why, I'm talking about 43 responses. So you basically have, 3 months after the close of the inspection is when the classification has to be, the final classification has to be made. So that's 3 months after the inspection. So these are timelines for FDA to complete. These are not, and these are like hopeful timelines for FDA to complete. So it doesn't always, the final classification is not always 90 days after the inspection closeout. Sometimes things take more time to evaluate, but for the most part, final classification and the decision letter for whether it's going to be, NAI is no action indicated is basically like when there's no 483 issued, and then there's voluntary action indicated, which is like, let's say you received a 483, but you responded and FDA determined that your corrections are adequate, and your response was adequate. That would be VAI classification. And OAI, as I was talking about earlier, was regarding when you get like a warning letter, your applications are withheld. You can get, import alert, untitled letter, those types of things. That final classification of whether NAI, VAI, or OAI should be done within 90 days after the inspection closeout. That doesn't always happen, but that's the projected timeline for classification. So therefore, you only have 1 or 2 updates before the final classification is made. So that's why your response is so vital. So getting really strong responses. The most important one is the initial one, within 15 business days. But to assemble a team of people and respond adequately and make corrections within 15 business days, it's tough. It's really difficult to do that. So, so oftentimes it's 1 or 2 updates, but whatever response you make to the observation should be, a really strong response and adequately address the observations, to avoid any type of OAI classification. So again, you have 2 days to provide, the initial recommendation by the FDA investigator, and then the pre-approval manager for pre-approval inspections is basically like the person that's in charge of, classifying what, if the facility is considered acceptable or not acceptable. So the pre-approval manager, and oftentimes, they have to make a decision within 20 business days after the closing inspection. So they'll evaluate the 483. They'll evaluate, the company's response to the 483, and then determine if the facility is considered acceptable or not acceptable. So if it's OAI classified, then the facility would automatically be not acceptable. You can't approve products from a facility that has an OAI classification, only NAI or VAI. So the Office of Process Facilities, so I was talking about OPF within CEDAR. So they review all withhold recommendations, and they're basically the ones that make the final decision on whether the withhold recommendation from the Office of Regulatory Affairs pre-approval manager, is justified. So again, OPF makes the final decision on whether the facility is acceptable for manufacture of new products, and whether, you know, so sometimes what happens is the inspector may say that this inspection is OAI, and then the pre-approval manager may look at the 483 and the company's response and say, hey, yeah, initially it was classified as OAI, but I really strongly feel that the company, adequately addressed these observations in their response. So then the pre-approval manager or OPF may determine that, the withhold recommendation is not really, uh, because of based on the company's adequate response, it's not really justified. So that's why the response is really, really important. Um, okay, so again, I was talking about NAI classification of no 483 is issued. That's the classification. VAI is when you get a 483 observation. It may be the observations may be significant, but if the company responds and FDA value determines that the response and proposed corrective actions are adequate, then they may classify it as VAI, and then OAI is when official regulatory action is recommended. So that would be like warning letter, import alert, things like that. Application withheld. So you want to, as a company, getting in that NAI or VAI status is really important. So what are some of the consequences of OAI classification? So, you can have a regulatory meeting, import alert, warning letter. You can have compliance holds for pending applications and supplements, loss of business and reputation. Those are kind of consequences of OAI. A lot of times companies will find out that their OAI classification when their applications are withheld. So if you have a lot of pending ANDA applications and you suddenly find out that, that they're being withheld because the facility has been determined as unacceptable, a lot of times you'll get that notification prior to receiving that letter from FDA within that, I was talking about that 90-day time frame for inspection classification, because all of those things are done up front regarding the application, the withhold recommendation will often be the first notification that a company will get when they're on OAI status. And again, when you're on OAI status, a reinspection is usually required to lift the OAI status. I can't really think of a situation where it's not. And then also, once you get an OAI status, and then the next inspection might be classified as VAI, your compliance history is every year when FDA schedules inspections, there's several different criteria that they're using. So they're looking at, it's all kind of a risk-based approach to like where they're going to be doing inspections and how often, the frequency of doing inspections at facilities. So some of the things they look at is the compliance history. So how many OAI classifications has the company received? What type of products is the company manufacturing? Are they sterile products, which would be a higher risk profile versus, over-the-counter products or OTC products, which may be kind of a lower risk profile. How many field alert reports were submitted by the company? Were there any significant recalls? How many products were shipped to the U.S.? Like all these things are considered, when FDA is, determining their, work plan for the year. So, the more OAI classifications that a facility has, the more frequent inspections you're going to get based on that risk profile. So, a lot of warning letters are issued because of repeat observations, or serious observations. So data integrity, inadequate OOS investigations, sterility issues for sterile manufacturing. Those are usually issues that would be, documented on a warning letter. And again, going back to when I was talking about earlier regarding that compliance programs, if you look at towards the end of the compliance program, it'll talk about some of the significant issues that FDA has found that have resulted in OAI classification. So that's why it's really good to like kind of at least review those compliance programs. They provide some good insight. So a lot of times when you get a warning letter, they'll ask for a retrospective third-party review of OOSs or some type of third-party, consulting company to come in and verify your corrections that are made. And they'll reference the section 211.34 to assist your, basically they're looking for an outside. They're suggesting that they're strongly suggesting that the company use an outside consultant to help them address some of the issues at the company. So if you look at the 211.34 regulations, it talks about, what a qualified consultant is. So, it should have the training, experience, and, education to, help the company. And then also, like when you hire consultants to do this, it's important to get their CV. So, include the person's name and their qualifications and retain that at the facility. So anybody that helps you as a consultant, it's important to get their CV and retain that in a file. So in case FDA comes back and says, hey, if there's like a follow-up inspection and they're concerned with the consultants that helped you, they may ask for the CVs of those consultants that helped you out. So it's important to kind of retain those CVs and make sure that they're adequately qualified to do remediation activities. And then oftentimes warning letters are public, so they're published on the FDA website. And then when you get a warning letter, you have 15 business days to submit your response, your initial response, and it should address each observation and be specific. And a lot of times, the warning letter may address issues that have already been discussed or addressed in some of your monthly updates to your 483. So it's important to kind of restate whatever corrections you've made to address the warning letter. The warning letter may reference your response, your initial 2 responses. But let's say if you have like 5 or 6 responses by the time you receive that warning letter, and some of those corrections have already been addressed to or been implemented to address those concerns, it's important to kind of rediscuss those in your response to the warning letter. And then also, seek advice from, outside experts and third parties in your warning letter response. So if you get an import alert, oftentimes, import alert will come before a warning letter. And basically like an import alert is when, you're not allowed to import your product into the United States. So, your application can be withheld if you're on OAI classification. I talked about it earlier where if you're an OAI classification, you can't get any products approved at your facility, like because the facility has to be an NAI or VAI status for any products to be approved at a facility. Okay. So what are some of the other consequences? You may get commercial or contractual lawsuits, as a consequence of non-compliance. You might get liability lawsuits, investor lawsuits, and there's been some instances of that. And then government contract. So if you're an OAI classification, if you're selling products to the U.S. government, or like Medicare or something like that, sometimes you'll have some issues with getting reimbursement. So that's all of my presentation today. So I'd like to kind of open it up to Q&A if possible. So I know I wouldn't, so I think we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. I went a little bit over. So,
no, it's okay. Okay, Dan. Your presentation was excellent. Really comprehensive and exhaustive, covering so many aspects. I'm sure all the delegates have benefited from your this very professional and very presentation, which shows your experience as an FDA investigator. and what is to be done and what is not to be done. It has really been appreciated. There are several questions. We'll see how many we are able to answer, maybe for another 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
And the questions are there in two different types. That there are questions, several questions about basically the inspection and related to pre-approval, post-approval inspections, FDA 483s and warning letters. And there are several questions about investigations. So I think we'll first take the questions which are about the inspection itself and how to respond to FDA 483s.
Hmm.
And if they are duplicate, we will try to see that. So the first one is, what is the frequency of post-approval inspection? Any frequencies there?
I you know, for post-approval inspections, uh, a lot of times they're grouped into surveillance inspections. So most of the time post-approval inspections don't occur, but like if it's like a product that is a lot of times post-approval inspections will be for NDA products, so new molecular entities. So a lot of times, if FDA approves a product, they want to go back within like 2 years or 1 year to see, okay, yes, we approved this product, but is the company still able to consistently manufacture the product in conformance with their application? So that's where you see most post-approval inspections. I generally don't see them too often for ANDA applications, because those are products that have already been approved. There's some, you know, um, information regarding, the manufacturer of that product, currently. So yeah, usually post-approval inspections are for NDA products,
Okay,
and we call them NMEs or new molecular entities.
thank you, thank you. What is the inspection planned by FDA due to pandemic situation in the next few months in India? There's several people have asked this question because they are really facing this problem, especially
Yeah,
those people who have classified their earlier inspections as OAI.
yeah. Yeah, I figured we'd get this type of question. So I yeah, it's kind of it's a really weird time for FDA right now. So they're uh you know the foreign inspections for the most part have been postponed. So what that means is sometimes they'll do a paper record review, so a remote audit. But that is not, from what I've seen. You guys may have more experience with this, but what I've seen is that's not really being done so all that often. It's being done, but not frequently. The problem where it comes into play is companies that have been classified as OAI, right, and have been inspected by, um, you know, let's say they've been in OAI status for 3 years and they were pending a reinspection in, let's say February of 2000, or let's say March of 2020, right? So they were planning on this reinspection. Everything was corrected. Everything's fine, and they've been in OAS status for maybe 3 years. All their corrections have been implemented, and then like COVID hit, right? So FDA stops all these inspections. I think FDA is taking a really conservative approach at this point regarding, letting companies off of OAI status that are currently on OAI status. So it's a little bit frustrating, and like I mean, as a company currently, like, you know, we've been working with a lot of companies in this type of situation. So FDA relies a lot on like mutual recognition. So like if the Europeans have been there and conducted inspections at that facility since FDA has left and it's been a successful inspection, some of that, um, but FDA has not been there to do a reinspection. You can use that as justification um, to say, hey, we've made successful corrections to these issues, and it's been inspected by a competent, regulatory agency. And basically, I'm talking about European or uh, um, or like TGA or Health Canada or any type of those agencies that FDA has mutual recognition agreements. But even so, like, FDA is still taking a really conservative approach and lifting these OEI statuses. So it's kind of, even for companies that have new products that are pending. Some products are even being held back uh, because FDA wants to inspect the facility prior to approval of the application. So it's really kind of a frustrating time at this point. But I understand. I mean, it's you know they're taking a really conservative approach because I don't think they want to take the nobody wants to lift the OAI status without actually being there. And I think there was a discussion. Um, Cedar did a discussion uh, about 2 months ago where they reinforced that type of opinion where they're not going to lift OAI status without doing a reinspection. So, but you can try and justify why you should be off OAI status, but like I think again they're just being very conservative at this point. So.
Thank you. Is there any difference between post-approval inspection and surveillance inspections? Usually we experience same approach.
Yeah, it's the same approach. I think for post-approval inspections, they're mostly looking at your process validation. So sometimes process validation is not performed at the time of the pre-approval inspection. So they issue these post-approval inspections to kind of evaluate, whether process validation was done properly. So that's kind of the main reason for these post-approval inspections is looking and evaluating your process validation.
Okay, so let me find another one on inspections. What is the requirement for paper-based audits, remote audits? What is FDA looking at?
So, I mean, they're going to be looking at, they're going to rely heavily on your quality system. So they're going to be looking at your deviations, your change controls, your kappas, all of the things that are included as your quality system, right? And looking at annual product reviews, things like that. So all that would be based on the paper-based one. They may ask for like a digital walkthrough of your facility. But to be honest, they haven't provided a lot of information about what the scope of these audits would look like. But I think from what I've understood is they're very kind of limited in scope. So it's not very comprehensive. And I think they, FDA as an agency really wants to be out there and inspecting sites. It's difficult to get a good feeling for how a site is being performed without actually being on site. And there's certain like inefficiencies to doing things remotely. So I think that's why, going back to the OAI status where they're unlikely to lift companies off OAI status based on the paper record review, I think that's why they take that standpoint. But for a perspective of things to look at, MHRA released a few documents on, remote audits. And then also, I believe TGA released one on remote audits. So, looking at those documents would be pretty helpful on what the expectation is for, doing a remote audit. But like, having a good point of contact for any questions that are raised during remote audits would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. There is a question on field alert report. So at the time of pre-approval inspection, does FDA expect that the 3-day field alert reporting system is in place? Or is it expected only when we start shipping commercial batches?
Yeah, so I would have your field alert procedure. It's just an SOP, so I don't think it would be really burdensome to have a field alert procedure available at the time of the pre-approval inspection. So if you have commercial products that are already being shipped from that facility, you should definitely have a field alert SOP. But when they're looking at your quality system, they may ask for your field alert SOP, and if you don't have one at the time of the pre-approval inspection, it goes back to readiness for manufacturing. So So they want to know, like, at the time of the inspection, if your product was approved today, would you be able to manufacture tomorrow? You know, so part of that is having adequate SOPs in place. So I would say yes. I would have a field alert SOP in place at the time of
Great.
the pre-approval.
Okay. Many times communication between is a big bottleneck during inspection, especially when the FDA inspector wants to communicate with the shop floor person. Employees at shop floor operations are not very comfortable to communicate in English. What is the FDA views on having a translator for these employees in an organization?
Yeah. So I was talking about it earlier regarding. I always find, yeah, when you're talking about to people in the shop floor, like sometimes there's a language barrier, like what you're saying, um, and they also feel very uncomfortable talking to FDA. So I'd say first thing is to have some FDA training on, talking, or you know how to kind of act or respond, and have people feel comfortable talking to FDA on the shop floor. Um, and that goes through training and kind of role playing with people. You could have it as a group thing, but if it's a situation where it's a language barrier, so oftentimes you might see that in like the packaging area, or sometimes even laboratory operations. You might, yeah, like shop floor or work, people working in the workshop. uh, if you're there as a translator, I think the best practice to do is say, you know, they want to interview the person that's actually doing the work, but explaining to the FDA investigator while they're there, again, having open communication, saying this person might, English might be like as a second or third language, so it's important to have a translator there. um, but explaining that to FDA why you're there and responding on that person's behalf would go a long way. But like, if the person talks and then you translate what that person's talking about to FDA, they might say, hey, you're speaking for this person, let this person talk. I've seen that a few times. So that's why it's important to explain why you're kind of translating on that person's behalf. So again, just open communication is really important.
Thank you. Thank you. Open communication. That's right. Uh, Now, during an inspection, some discussions turn into observations due to misunderstanding. Later, the inspector refuses to discuss further on the issue. What an organization can do to clarify the same in an effective way.
Yeah. So that's why it's important to clarify issues at the time of occurrence. So don't wait for the 43 to be issued and say, hey, like, so I've seen a lot of observations where somebody's interviewing somebody on the shop floor, and they might have misspoke about something, and that's written up on the 43. But like, right when that person misspeaks about something, just ask for clarification. Like, don't speak on behalf of that person. Like, say, oh, I don't think that person's correct in saying that, but saying, talking to that person on the shop floor, saying, I heard you say, uh, you know, blank. Is that true that you actually do it like this? And then having that person respond, and then responding to FDA. I think that would be best practice to clarify any misunderstandings. But definitely, once it's on the 483 and you're trying to clarify that during the closeout meeting, it may not go well. So it's important to clarify those issues at the time of the occurrence. So.
Okay. Now see on this, this responding to FDA 483s and warning letters, there are several questions. I'm not able to go through all of them, more than 50, 60 questions. So I think you have given your email ID, so if they want, they can contact you or your company for this. Now we'll just take one or two questions on the other. There are other topic,
Yeah.
which there are several questions, which is investigations. So let me read some of them. And basically what this questions are, because there are also another 40 to 50 questions on the investigations,
Huh.
failure investigations and all that. And basically what these questions are asking is what do you do if you're not able to determine a root cause?
Right.
That is one thing. What if the investigation is not conclusive? what will FDA expect? Most of the questions are relating to this investigation, and you're not able to find a root cause.
Mhm. Right. So you're absolutely right. Like, a lot of times you'll have maybe like three probable root causes, and then when you test, and sometimes when you do hypothesis testing, it's not possible to um, recreate situations where your hypothesis can be tested and evaluated that are data driven. So, when possible, you should be doing that. But as you're saying, I mean, sometimes you can't find uh, the root cause, but like if you have probable root causes, it's important to document why it's a probable root cause, and you know, and being scientific based as possible on why you feel that it's a probable root cause. That can go a long way. But like, yeah, I mean, especially when it comes to like sterility failure investigations, like sometimes those are tough to do, so a lot of times you're not going to find a definitive root cause, but like, at least having some probable root causes and having some scientific data or justification for why you feel that way is really important.
Thank you. There is one more question we'll take on the last one on again investigations. And the question is again related to that, when you're not able to find a root cause and you're having a particular hypothesis, and that hypothesis is also inconclusive. So many times what people do is the sample is tested again by X number of additional analysts,
Mm,
6 analysts or 4 analysts, and like this, and which is there in their SOPs. And that time the sample passes,
right.
and can they release it, and how will FDA look at this, that you don't have a root cause, your hypothesis you're not been able to prove, but you're doing the retesting with say 4 additional analysts, 6 additional analysts, and the sample passes.
Right. So exactly. So that's a good question. So I see this often. So you should have, when you do your retesting, you should have a retesting strategy. So some type of protocol or that describes a sampling plan. So if you have 2 analysts that test in like 4 or 7 replicates or whatever your SOP describes as far as a testing plan for that, right? So let's say you do that testing plan, 2 analysts, 4 replicates. So you have 8 results that are all passing, and then you have an initial OS result not um, that is not passing, but you don't have a definitive root cause for that. What the expectation is that when you report the results, you report the results of all of those 8 replicate testing that are within specification, and also include that OOS result that was not within specification. So so that would be like 9 results or whatever, right? So you take those 8 passing and those 1 failing result, and you report that, right? So now you have results that are both passing and not passing. So now QA has to make a decision on, and they have to take a conservative approach on this. Um, is the product acceptable for release, right? So as a determination of that, they have to, the best practice is to conduct some type of risk assessment or product impact assessment on the release of this product, because now you have 8 results that are saying it's passing, and you have 1 result that's saying it's not passing, but you don't have a definitive root cause. So reporting all those results and including a risk assessment for that, and a determination by QA on the disposition of that product is the expectation. All that's described in the OOS guidance from October 2006.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. It's been a great, really wonderful presentation. Today we had maximum registrations for a webinar
Oh,
exceeding
nice.
2000, and we had
Wow.
maximum attendance exceeding, I think, maybe 600 or so who
Wow.
attended at different times. So thank you so much. And before we close the webinars, again, I'll give you to say last few words to all the delegates. What would be your advice? Few things if you want to tell them.
I, you know, first of all, it was just a pleasure, presenting to you today. I hope you gained something from this presentation. Um, but I also want to say, investigations are really important. And defining the scope on those, and then, when you do receive 43 observations, it's important to, put a lot of effort in responding adequately to those and describing your corrective actions and timeframes for completion of those activities, and provide these monthly updates, and just have an open communication and discuss all your corrections and in your response. I think it will go a long way.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Daniel. And with this, delegates, thank you for tuning in today. We have several webinars planned over the next 3 to 4 months. Please visit our website, ispeindia.net, and register for webinars which interest you. Unfortunately, we are not able to take all the questions because there are more than 70 to 80 questions. Daniel Roberts has given his email ID. Email ID is there, Daniel, here. So anyway, if you can just project your email ID, they would get in touch with you, or they can connect with you on LinkedIn, or if you're there on Twitter, they can connect with you on Twitter, or you can just say out your email ID. They will.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to contact me. It's daniel.roberts@hoganlovells.com. But probably the best way to contact me is via LinkedIn. I can communicate directly through you with that. I also have a WhatsApp. So
Okay. Great. You want to tell your WhatsApp number?
Yeah, it's 916
916
895
895
6422.
6422. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. So with this, we are closing today's webinar. Thank you for tuning in today. Once again, wishing good wishes for our Independence Day. Have a good weekend, and we'll meet next week. Thank you, and good evening, and bye-bye.
Thank you.